Hey, deserving listeners, this is part 3 in which I react to Trisha and Ethan on Frenemies with Dr. Drew. Dr. Drew is trying to help the two of them, and as a relational therapist myself and a professor, I have a lot of things to say usually when I watch other therapists, so let's get into it. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. Like I said, I'm a therapist and a professor. Let's get to the show.
Taking pills or whatever, like I take pills or whatever, but you've done it too, and you're just not open about it.
I don't think that is a defining characteristic of who I am.
I think that is a big thing. That makes sense. Why? Because you're on medication now, and there's no shame or judgment in it. But like, hey, if you're going to shame me for being off meds, you should say, hey, I'm on meds.
I'm not shaming you for being off meds.
That's what it sounds like. You just call me crazy.
I'm just going to take a guess and say that when people watch this, they are taking sides, that they either identify with one or the other. I don't know the percentage, but I'm guessing that that's what happens when you watch this. As a couples therapist, I don't see the world that way. When I watch these two, I just see that they are trying to relate and they're hurt by each other and they're trying to win. They're trying, essentially when people engage in conversations like this, they have this fantasy and they're hoping that the other person will say, oh, touche, you know what? You won this one. You're right. I am wrong. Thank you for pointing that out. It's this fantasy that people get into of like, okay, if I use verbal judo, or if I blast them with this thing, or if I go through my Rolodex of ammo against this person, I'll corner them and they won't be able to get out, or the people observing will all get behind me and we can blast this person. And then where are you? Now, of course, this is a YouTube channel, I think, based on the fact that they argue. So if they're trying to create content that engages people and gets people to watch, then mission accomplished. So we also have to think about that. What would they be doing if they weren't being filmed on a YouTube channel that's designed to have them fight occasionally? So when I see this, there's a temptation kind of from me that's actually an old part of me that existed before I was a couples therapist, where I want to be like, oh yeah, there's this tendency when we see people fighting where we want to figure out, okay, who's right and who's wrong. And usually we do it pretty quickly. And sometimes it's just based on identification. Like if you're a guy, you're just like, oh, I identify with him. So we very quickly make that bias of just like, okay, that person's right, the other person's wrong. And then you see the conversation through that lens. So if we use these reaction videos that I make as a jumping off point to learn something, I'm gonna rewind it, and I challenge you to watch this either from a position that they're both hurt and that they're both trying to express their hurt through attacking the other person. So they're hurt, they cover that with anger, and then they express the anger with hostility through accusation and trying to win the argument. So I challenge you to look at it through that lens, and only through that lens, without trying to figure out who's right and who's wrong. Or you look at it from the standpoint that they are both suffering. That's another way to look at it. That this is another clinical thing that I do a lot with my trainees, which is the sooner you can as a couples therapist just see them without putting a lot of effort into it. You got to do it over and over and over again. You just watch two people, although they're not exhibiting the suffering, it's there. The suffering is there. And if you pay attention to that, then it really changes the way you see it and the way you feel about it. Because one of the things that when you watch it from, shall I say, a mainstream common way of reacting to it is, who's right, who's wrong, then you're engaged and you're sort of like standing next to the person that you're an ally with, and you're having all these thoughts like, yeah, and you're like when a crowd forms around two people fighting, their friends gather around them, and so when you're watching on YouTube, there's that tendency of like, okay, whose side am I on? And then once you're on that side, then you're like, yeah, I get him, and no, that's stupid, and that doesn't get us anywhere. Now, we can watch things and be entertained, and that's fine. But if we are going to improve our lives, and if we're going to improve our relationships, if we're going to reduce conflict in our own relationships, we have to be able to pull ourselves away from it a little bit to differentiate ourselves from the mire of emotionality and the mire of bias and of knee-jerk reactions and say, okay, what's happening right here? What's going on? in the middle of a fight, or you're watching two people fighting, friends of yours or something, or you're watching your spouse fight with your kids. That's a common thing that you'll see. Instead of taking sides, of stepping back and going, okay, deep breath. What's going on here? I see suffering. I see people triggering each other. I see hurt feelings. I see fear. I don't see expressions of fear. I don't see expressions of hurt. I see expressions of accusation and anger. And so let's practice that, because not only you clinicians out there, which I know a lot of you are watching, that's a good thing to obviously have as a clinician, but it's also good for our relationships.
Taking pills or whatever, like I take pills or whatever, but you've done it too, and you're just not open about it.
I don't think that is a defining characteristic of who I am.
I think that is a big thing. That makes sense. Why? Because you're on medication now, and there's no shame or judgment in it. But like, hey, if you're going to shame me for being off meds, you should say, hey, I'm on meds.
I'm not shaming you for being off meds.
So I will say that I don't know about you, but it's a little easier to look at Trisha and see the underlying hurt. That she's hurt for being called crazy. She's hurt for, things that she's being accused of or whatever. Whereas for him, it's a little harder. I don't know. Maybe y'all will agree this, maybe you don't. But for me, it's a little harder for me to see the suffering that he's going through. And this is common. You'll see this a lot in relationships where one person will exhibit their feelings more on their sleeves. It's much easier to read them. And then the other person is harder to read. For people like Ethan, it's very tempting to look at them and say they're unemotional and they're not suffering on the inside. That is almost never true. And I have worked with so many people and met people like him, and then eventually learned, oh, they are suffering on the inside deeply. Now, maybe y'all know him much better because you watch him on YouTube, and maybe you have a lot more data on that. I don't know. But I just want to point that out, that as you're watching, it might be, for some people, hard to see. I don't think Ethan's suffering. I think he's totally comfortable and everything's fine. That's almost never true, by the way. I don't know. I'd have to ask him, but usually in situations like this, it doesn't feel good. And if we grew up in families where we learned how to protect ourselves from vulnerability by acting like we're tough and acting like we don't have any feelings, or even being cut off from our own feelings, then we might exhibit a outward appearance that everything's fine and we're nonchalant. But those sorts of people, not only are they suffering, they're suffering even more because they never get a chance to express it and get care from other people. I don't know about Ethan, but it's just I'll just throw it out there.
That's what it sounds like. You just call me crazy,
but here's
which
what you
means
do.
I'm off
You know
medication.
what you just did? You're trying to see. This is why you are such a dangerous person, especially to be close with, because you'll take something that I've told you. You'll take something that somebody told you in confidence, and you'll use it. You'll weaponize it against them.
Who knows? But I would speculate that underneath that statement for him is a lot of suffering. He is saying you are dangerous to the world because you will take something that people will tell you in confidence, and you'll weaponize it against them. That might be true. I don't know, but I think what that's pointing to is he's hurt that she used something that he told her in confidence as a ammo against him to fight back. Now, if I'm understanding the conflict, he called her crazy, and that hurt her feelings, and so that's why she pulled that confidential bit of information out to level the playing field, so to speak. Which two wrongs don't make a right, of course. But so instead of saying, ouch, it hurts that I told you something in confidence that I used pills many years ago to cope with life, and in the middle of our conflict, you just pulled that out and just weaponized it against me, and that really hurts my feelings. It's like humiliating to just. I don't know if I was ready to expose that to the internet. I don't know. That would be, I'm guessing, a more honest, authentic expression of how he's feeling primarily. But because we have trouble being vulnerable, we have trouble trusting, and we look weak when we are like that way, because society chooses that for some stupid reason, then we cover it up with bravado and being tough and anger, and then we attack back. You are bad for the internet. You weaponize confidential information against other people instead of, ouch, that hurt. Let's rewatch that.
That's what it sounds like. You just call me crazy,
but here's
which
what you
means
do.
I'm off
You know
medication.
what you just did? You're trying to see. This is why you are such a dangerous person, especially to be close with, because you'll take something that I've told you. You'll take something that somebody told you in confidence, and you'll use it. You'll weaponize it against them.
That's not true.
That's what you just did.
No,
and luckily,
no.
This would be a very important moment in relational therapy where I would stop him and I would say, okay, Good, because they're about to just bicker. They're about to just continue bickering because they're in that heightened mode where their heart is racing, their stress hormones are raging, and their brain isn't functioning normally. They're undifferentiated, and they are defensive, and everything is being filtered through that anger and that protectiveness and that defensiveness. But so I'd slow things down, and I would say to Ethan, you just said something very Ethan. That's his name, right? Ethan. I would talk to Ethan, and I would say, you just said something very, very important. But so I just want to slow things down for a second. Tell me more about that. You say that she weaponized something. To me, that sounds like you're hurt. I don't know. Is that what's going on? So I might try to prime the pump in that way, or I might just ask an open-ended question of, when she said that, how did you feel? Because I'm trying to get to that place of him being able to say, it hurt my feelings, and just stop there. Instead of saying, well, it didn't bother me, she's just dangerous, okay? Sometimes it takes years to get to a point where I can ask someone how to make you feel, and they can say, it hurt my feelings. Because some of us have been shamed or abused to such an extent that, one, we will never admit that we're hurt. Because when we admitted we were hurt when we were young, we got beat even more, or we were rejected. When you're being rejected and harmed as a child and you're hurting, that's terrible, right? Just absolutely horrible. And then you raise your hand and you're like, I'm hurting, and then no one cares. Well, that's double the hurt, maybe even 10 times the hurt. So someone's hurting you, terrible. You raise your hand, you say, I'm hurt. They don't care. That's even more hurt. So if someone's hurting you, you learn, don't say you're hurt, because you're just going to invite more pain. You're already in pain. Don't invite more pain by telling people you're in pain, because no one's going to care, and that's going to be painful. And so people have a really hard time raising their hand and saying that hurt. So sometimes they take a long time for people to be able to admit that, even to themselves.
For you, I don't care, and I'm okay with it. But you go, oh, well, I told you an anecdote about how I used to take tramadol back in Israel when I was bored in a dead-end job, and you literally just weaponized that against me.
You called me crazy, knowing my history.
Bro, we always call. And also a little bit of context, she's dating my brother-in-law.
So you heard her say that. She's like, you called me crazy, knowing my history. So I'm guessing that underneath that is she was really hurt when he called her crazy, really hurt her feelings. And that's why she brought up something to attack him back. And I'm guessing that a lot of their fights have to do with that. I don't know, but usually fights have to do with that very thing. The terror and distrust that leads to people not being able to admit that they were just hurt by the other person, full stop. Hey, that hurt my feelings. I don't know if I'm weird that hurt me, but it hurt my feelings. I just want you to know that. I value our relationship. I value your opinion of me. And what you said, it just kind of hurts. Saying it like that, the other person's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Now, as Ethan said earlier, that would be a very boring YouTube channel, unfortunately.
So that was harsh on both your sides, right? Mm-hmm. It's really hard to be as open as Trish is. And you could argue that you're so open, Trish, that you don't really kind of perceive boundaries normally, if that makes sense. Is that true?
You knew you were being a bitch.
Can I just say
hold on.
Okay, so Dr. Drew is attempting to help, I think, by taking a leap, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. A therapist, I do this all the time. Sometimes I take a leap to try to move therapy forward, and it falls short. So he just took a leap. He said, so Trisha, you're the sort of person where you just say everything, and that can be a good thing for you, but at other times it means that you don't have boundaries, and you don't know the difference between a confidential statement and an open statement. Sometimes you might reveal confidential information. I think that's what he's saying. And then Trisha is like, I don't know. Okay, so then right away, as a therapist, you must pull back. You must go, okay, I'm wrong about that. One, you probably are wrong about it because clients actually have a really hard time pushing back on their therapists. And actually, Trisha, up until this point, has been pretty deferential to Dr. Drew. So if anything, she's more likely, I think, to agree with him just because I think she likes him. If a client ever says that, says, I don't know about that. One, they're probably right. Two, even if they're not right and you're right, what good does it do to impose your interpretation on them at that point? You're just going to ruin the relationship. And any chance of them accepting what you have to say can be ruined by you, doubling down on it. And as a therapist, you have to be okay with being wrong. It's one of the most important things. Paradoxically, when I was in the beginning of my career, I was so insecure, which is often the case, if not universally the case, that I had a really hard time admitting when I was wrong. The more competence and the more confidence I acquired throughout my 25 years as a therapist, the so much easier it was for me to say, you know what, I'm wrong. I don't know everything. What do I know? And the humility was just so helpful, just so refreshing, because it helps in moments like this of just like, oh, okay, tell me where I'm wrong. And that's the beauty of therapy is, as a therapist, you can be wrong, and a client can say, you're wrong. And now you get an opportunity to say, okay, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me the truth. It's just a jumping off point. You don't need to be right all the time. And you could literally be wrong every single time as a therapist if you work it right. If you work it right, it's an opportunity for a client to tell you what really is true for them, which is great to hear.
Don't talk with the you stuff. Stop it. I'm wondering
it's perceived by me that you knew you were being a fucking bitch.
The other thing I'll say is for a therapist, and this is maybe advice to you therapists out there, and advice to you clients out there as well to ask for this, is for when a therapist apologizes to their client, it can be one of the most therapeutic moments you could ever create in therapy. For a lot of people, particularly people who have been abused, they have never been apologized to. No one has ever sat them down and said, you know what? I am so sorry for what I did to you. I am so sorry that I hurt you. I'm so sorry that I put you through that. I'm so sorry I didn't listen to you. I'm so sorry I was in love with my ideas and I didn't accept your knowledge of your own self. I'm sorry, and I was wrong. And I shouldn't have pressured you into believing what my perspective was. I bulldozed you. That's on me. I am sorry. To be able to say that to a client, for some clients, this will be the biggest moment of their life. They're like, whoa, this is the first time someone's ever really truly apologized to me. And it's my therapist who I respect, someone that I think is a smart person. And if they're apologizing to me, what does that say? That means I deserve to be apologized to. That means I deserve respect. It means my feelings matter. I matter. To apologize to someone, you are communicating all those things. You matter. And I care about you so much that I'm willing to say I'm wrong and you're right. And there's a justice issue here as well, where I was wrong and I hurt you or I wronged you somehow, and I value justice, even when I have to fess up to doing something wrong. I value justice. To model that, to exhibit that, and to embody that for your client can be one of the most powerful experiences you can ever have. And this is what I tell my trainees as well, is don't be afraid of making mistakes. Just be afraid of not apologizing afterwards. Don't beat yourself up if you make a mistake in a session. Beat yourself up if you don't apologize at the next session. That's what I tell people, because so many therapists are just terrified of making mistakes. Now, you want to try not to make mistakes, but if you do, it is a golden opportunity for a humongous therapeutic moment. So in that moment, Dr. Drew said something, and she's like, that could have been a wonderful opportunity for Dr. Drew to say like, oh, I'm sorry, tell me what's going on. And you know what? I apologize for assuming something. Tell me where I'm wrong here. But it kind of got a little chaotic there, but anyway.
You guys play with that, and Trisha can't do that. She can't really perceive boundaries. It's just all out there. It's all open. Well, you can do it, but you can't expect her to magically know where to draw the line.
But can I also say he has no boundaries with me. He can say whatever he wants about me. The minute there was an issue. This is a whole different issue.
All right. So Dr. Drew is interpreting the situation and saying that Trisha doesn't understand boundaries, and by extension, Ethan does understand boundaries, and that Ethan shouldn't expect, I think that's what he's saying, that Ethan shouldn't expect Trisha to hold things in confidence because Trisha, by her nature, cannot have boundaries in life. Now, I don't know if that's an accurate conceptualization of the situation. It seems pretty hasty to say something like that. And you notice that for Trisha, she's not agreeing the way she was in the past. She's now going, no, the thing is here. So as a clinician, you have created a relationship rupture with one person. You have bought in to the problem that people bring to these sessions, which is, I'm right and the other person's wrong, right? I'm healthy and that person's crazy, right? For you to agree with that triangulation is a massive problem, not only for your relationship with Trisha, but also with Ethan. That Ethan is observing, whoa, did you just agree with me in attacking this person? Does that mean you might agree with her in attacking me? Is that what's like? So you need to, as a therapist, understand that no, don't take those leaps. Now, maybe Dr. Drew's conceptualization, if we were to talk away from these people, I would be convinced of his assessment. He'd be like, no, I've watched their videos. I've seen this before, this and this and this. Maybe I would agree with that. I don't know. But did the intervention work? I don't think it's working right now because Trisha she's not on board with it. Because if you're going to say something like that, I assume you're wanting Trisha to be like, you know what? Yeah, that's right. I do have a harder time with boundaries. Thank you for saying that, or something like that. But that's clearly not what happened. All right, well, that does it for part 3. Okay, I didn't realize it was going to take me this long to get through it. Stay tuned for part 4 later on, in which I continue watching this and continue to react to it. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.